Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets are through 2 preseason games, but do we already have a clear picture of what the bench unit will look like this season for the Nets? We dive in on the first men off the bench and what could happen at the back end of the rotation when injuries stop players from putting out samples. We go ahead and dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, this episode is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And Doug, today is all about maybe refining what we expect for the Brooklyn Nets starting rotation, first men in off the bench, and what this unit is going to look like this season in Brooklyn. Clearer picture maybe than we anticipated after just 2 games in the preseason.
Yeah, sometimes injuries have a way of fleshing things out a little quicker than you thought they were going to be. No Nick Claxton, so you get, a somewhat deeper look at maybe who the bench units are going to be. Obviously, we're still waiting to see if Killian Hayes ever even plays. But from the first couple preseason games, what we have seen is where the team looks like it's going in terms of its bench rotation, or at least who's higher up the food chain than others. And I think it's, we'll see what happens here on Wednesday, where sometimes these third preseason games, we see some of the key starters play a little less. If you roll around the NBA, you kind of do get a sense that, sometimes these third games it's more of a longer look and some of the key guys don't play. But I think from the early on, we've seen that Noah Clowney, Jalen Wilson and Ziaire Williams are a big part of the story around what's going to happen here in Brooklyn this year. And that really kind of, is Claxton independent, I would say. Helps a little bit to have him not here, but those 3 guys are clearly like the first big, wing rotation guys and big guys off the bench, even without Claxton, and no Day'Ron Sharpe as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned, Trendon Watford obviously hasn't been out there for them, but that isn't going to, that's going to maybe impact the Noah Clowney piece or the Ziaire Williams piece, or just that there's these 3 players. And we talk about that a little bit more coming up here, but just on the onset, but all those players getting 20 minutes a run, being the first guys in there. Jalen Wilson, I think, is a big piece, obviously coming off of the productive summer league. The Noah Clowney, when we talked about minutes breakdowns, it was how do you find these pockets for these guys? When you mention injuries, it does help 2 things, I think. It helps the Brooklyn Nets in saying, well, if Nicholas Claxton's not going to play, it means we just get bigger, quicker looks at some of these guys. And even though you want to have your healthy unit, that's different than Killian Hayes. When Nicholas Claxton can't play, you go, well, we know what he's going to be. We know what his role is. Now we get to find out if Ziaire Williams can have a role coming off the bench for this team. With Killian Hayes, it's just, okay, and we'll talk about Shake Milton coming up here. The backcourt, you go, I guess if we don't see you, then we don't get to make a different choice about Ben Simmons and about Dennis Schroeder and even Keon Johnson, who missed the second preseason game, right? So that feels a little more muddied in terms of what's going to happen in the backcourt. But from a Jalen Wilson, Noah Clowney, and Ziaire Williams standpoint, even when Trendon Watford comes back, I would just put Trendon Watford into that group and say, there you go. There's your first four guys that you expect to see here. Is there anything different when we talk, maybe just throw Trendon Watford into this discussion, as far as his role with what we've seen from Ziaire Williams and the expectations for Noah Clowney? Like, is Trendon Watford potentially going to end up back in those, 12, 13, 14 minutes and maybe not have this defined role for this team coming in?
It's always so hard to say, right? We don't really know. Without, the absence of evidence isn't always evidence, but so I'm not exactly sure. I do think that, though, I think he has a role in this team, and I think as some of these veterans get hopefully traded, we'll see some of these things kind of just even out also. But I think from the beginning, what we're seeing is if you're a commitment to, so there's dueling sort of banjos that are happening with the team right now, which we've discussed many, many times, which is they have to pay some lip service to the veterans who are still just good NBA players that are better than most of the guys the Nets have on the bench anyway, right? So that's not a controversial take. Like DFS, like Cam Johnson, like these guys are better. These are, higher end role players. But after that, the part where Noah Clowney and Jalen Wilson and Ziaire Williams are essentially the first three guys off the bench is a good sign for the youth movement of where, of how this team is going to go. And I do think that seeing that, and maybe Watford ends up fitting into this as well, because I think the Nets would be benefited by lessening the minutes of the starters, getting some deeper rotations, and just getting longer looks at guys. And I think that we're going to see that over the course of this year. But knowing that Clowney is like essentially six man right now to some degree, that Jalen Wilson right now, no Claxton, but he's seventh man right now, and maybe he gets pushed down to eighth. That's still pretty high. I mean, for a second round draft pick, being maybe an eighth guy on the bench is not out of a role. And that Ziaire Williams is getting long run here with kind of the starters, and he's getting a longer run with those with both kind of groups. 24 minutes last game. I do think we're going to see a very strong commitment to seeing these guys as a big part of the mix, and that will only grow, right? Because one of these guys is going to get injured. I mean, DFS, Cam Johnson, these guys have Ben Simmons, right? These guys are not exactly pillars of health, and so I think DFS, I guess, is an injury prone, but between those guys, potential injury concerns, between the fact that someone probably gets traded here eventually, I think that we're just going to see. I think we can feel very confident in the minutes from these wing guys for sure. Like I feel these three guys, Clowney already felt confident about that one going in. Jalen Wilson wasn't sure, but this just confirms it. And Ziaire Williams wasn't sure, but this just confirms it, is that that 18 minutes out of the gate for these guys, 17 minutes out of the gate off the bench is realistic with healthy room for upside on those minutes and not much downside, I don't think.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember going back to, we probably have a whole other episode talking about our minutes projections in the offseason versus maybe what we would update them to now. We're going to do that for sure. But I think Ziaire Williams was one of the guys that I might have put towards the back end of it. I didn't even give Shake Milton any minutes at all. We'll talk about how that's clearly looking like it's going to be off, at least coming into the season. But Ziaire Williams, I didn't know what to make out of it. So I put him into that. You'll get some run here, but these other players are going to be ahead of him. And even being a little bit more bullish on a Clowney or on a Jalen Wilson, the way that you spread those minutes out, or the way I did anyway, felt like you're having a very much all season long, we're trying to get samples on every single guy throughout. This feels like veterans are starting, key players that are mostly young are coming off the bench first, and then we'll see what happens with the rest of this rotation, which will feel different to me. I thought this might be a very deep rotation game over game. I'm sure we'll get those moments, but Jordi Fernandez may be trying to move towards having his top 8 guys and then the occasional 9th and 10th player that makes contributions. Let's talk about that backcourt, though, coming up here in a second. Is Shake Milton, crafty veteran, finding a way onto the roster for the Brooklyn Nets? We'll dive into that and the injuries inside of that backcourt coming up next.
Before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Look, there's no better time to get in the action than right now in FanDuel. You got the NFL season rolling along, got the NBA season right around the corner. Nothing better than FanDuel, especially in the middle of the game, right? You can check the latest stats. You're going to get into the play-by-play. It's all on the same page where you're going to put in your bets. Right now, you can get the Nets. They're playing the Sixers tonight. I know it's preseason. Nets right now are minus 10.5. Minus 10.5. You're never going to see the Nets at minus 10.5 favorites. I'm telling you right now, for the next 3 years. 3 years in regular season play. So if you want a chance to bet the Nets at minus 10.5 right now over on FanDuel, they're going to give you the chance. You're also going to get started with $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet, $200 in bonus bets. Just got to put that first $5 bet in. That's over at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, waiting for the Brooklyn Nets to take on the 76ers, get more sample sizes, get more opportunities to clarify where these rotations are going to go. Before we talk about Shake Milton, who fell into this ambiguous category of expectations and what was going to look like for him in preseason, were you able to pull up the minutes that we did with our projections over the summer? Because I probably will be constructive around what we thought maybe versus where we are today.
I actually think we weren't too far off, honestly. And we have some more information now. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. We'll do a whole other minutes prediction later. But the starting lineup, we were pretty set on. We had Simmons as the sixth man, which he might still be with Claxton comes back, right? So I think that's fine. We had Clowney as seventh man. That looks correct. Bojan Bogdanovic, looks like that's going to be a delete. So you take him off. That opens up 17 minutes. Jalen Wilson, we had there at 15 minutes. I actually think I'd stay pretty close to that now. And Ziaire Williams, we had at 10. And I probably would bump that up a little bit, right? I don't think I'd make too many changes here based on what we've seen, except for just eliminating the Bojan minutes, which is great because that just frees up 17 more minutes right now, 223. So we'll do a longer one. I think it's funny. I actually think I don't know if I would change this that much. And except for boosting Ziaire Williams up, probably boosting Clowney up a little bit. And, maybe figuring out the guard situation, which we're going to talk about right now. But other than that, I think, I don't know, pretty bang up job. Pat him, raise your hand, turn it around, pat myself on the back, right? Yeah.
It's been a while since we've been able to break that one out, but it feels good. And I don't even want to be bullish here, but I'm pretty sure I left Bogdanovic completely off of my minutes column. Just saying here, I said, this guy, I don't rely on it until I can see it on the court. We'll find out. And as Doug said, we'll do a whole nother episode, maybe just refining them and giving a little bit of boost to certain players that have shown up here in the preseason, one of which might be Shake Milton. Listen, Keon Johnson doesn't play in the second game. Killian Hayes right now, if I had to call it, I'd say he's not making this roster. Why? Because he's not playing. And you cannot dedicate a roster spot, even with all this pedigree in the world. And is Shake Milton, like, I'll ask the question to myself and to you, it's like Shake Milton now, he almost feels like another Dennis Schroeder. You're like, do you really, this guy, is he critical to have on your roster? Do you need him, not need him? I don't know. But guess what? Then when he goes and plays, you always get kind of solid quality minutes. You understand the return you're getting when he's on the court. We understand what the agenda is here for this team in the long term of the season. There's probably some value in just keeping another veteran player like this, not only because of the lack of what you have inside of the backcourt rotations, but because he just represents value that other players at this moment do not.
Yeah, Shake actually, to a certain degree, is going to bring more than I probably thought he was going to when they first signed him. One, I just wasn't even sure how long he was going to be around. Had him for 5 minutes in that first run. I'm going to bump this up a little bit, mostly because something we talked about last episode regarding Schroeder, which was our concern that if Schroeder were to get hurt, they just have nothing in the point guard department. And except for Shake. And so if he's going to be the sort of the de facto backup point guard at this point, because I don't think we're not going to call Ben Simmons a point guard by the traditional sense. So It's fine. That's not a knock against him. I just don't think he's just not your traditional point guard, offensive organizer. And so they're just going to need somebody. Like Schroeder might get traded. These guys are all injury risks just based on age. And Shake at 6'5", we've already said that, like, he looks big out there. Like, he looks almost like a wing. He's got a big frame. He's got good downhill stuff to the basket. He's got a bunch of NBA minutes in already under his belt. So, like, there's like a certain level of just kind of like, it's funny when we're calling, these guys like this, like the veterans at this point, but he's 28 years old. He's been around a long time. So I think that his role, short of Killian Hayes coming out here and just popping off, which I don't think is so likely. And Keon Johnson just isn't even this kind of guy anyway either, right? He's more of, I would call, like a combo guard, score first combo guard. And so I just think that Shake probably has a role here. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in this preseason game. But what we've seen from the first two is, again, I know everyone hates this because everyone wants the young guys to just play every single minute, and they want the veterans to just turn into a bag of dust and just get chucked into the ocean. I get it, but it's just not realistic, and it's not helpful to the young guys. If you roll the balls out on the court, if you just roll the balls on the court and stick, 5 20-year-olds out there to just kind of like, F around and find out, it's just that's not good basketball process. And so every once in a while, you do need guys that kind of like get what happens on the NBA court, especially a point guard. And so I think that he's going to have a role here.
Listen, 5 young individuals set out to solve any problem in life. I think that the return on those investments are almost always golden. Yeah. My thing about Shake Milton too is, if you think about it, you mentioned there, so Keon Johnson has a role. Let's say that he makes this roster and he is the combo guard, and you think about him as maybe a Cam Thomas light type of player, or at least having the same type of vein, scorer. Okay. The Shake Milton piece of this is, if we're not going to label Ben Simmons a point guard, which we shouldn't going into the season, if he's going to be sharing the court with Dennis Schroeder, then you also want to be able to look and say, can I have him flex Dennis into the second unit and keep Claxton out, get Ben Simmons off the court. When Ben Simmons comes back in, do I want to have another player that can be a ball handler, that can set the table a little bit and continue to keep us as traditional doesn't really matter, but just have the player on the court that can set up others and can also do some scoring out of that role. Because even if this game number 2 for Ben Simmons looked exciting and he did attack at the basket, that's not going to necessarily be the case every single night. And every single night, you're not going to get him ranging out to the elbow and taking perimeter shots. So I think, as you mentioned there, the detriment to the youth or to the development of certain players is lacking veterans that across these rotations, you can say, but we still have our boxes checked in terms of roles so that a Jalen Wilson can hustle his butt off on defense, get out in transition, spot up on the perimeter, and be ready to knock down shots when those opportunities come. So this is where, listen, he had a small Shake Milton, 19 minutes, 3 of 3 in that first game of the preseason. Only had 1 assist in that, but put up 9 points. And then you turn around, he was 6 of 7 from the field in the game against Washington. So I think it's everything. I think it's every part of his game at whatever ceiling he's capped at that actually matters for Brooklyn potentially early days here. And then you mentioned trade possibilities as well. Maybe Milton's the guy that ends up sticking around on the back end of that, so you still have those players in place.
He might be a trade candidate too, though the value is probably pretty low at this point. So I do think, again, it's never clear. Like we know Keon Johnson sprained ankle, didn't play, right? Like he played the first game. We don't know what the real plan is here. Obviously Killian Hayes, no one has talked more about Killian Hayes for guys we've never even seen in a Nets uniform than him. But this is what happens when you just get former really high lottery picks in the door who were basically kicked out of this previous city that they were in. But so we still don't have this really, really, really clear sense, but we do the best with the information we're given, and the information to give, we know these things to be true. We know the Nets have a lot of wings and they have very few guards, right? We know that most NBA teams would prefer to have some guards on their team to be able to do certain things on the basketball court that the other wing guys and bigs can't. And again, it's not like their wings are Paolo Banchero or Jason Tatum, who are like high-end wing creators, Paul George, like these guys who can break guys down off the dribble and, effectively run pick and roll on their own if they need to, right? Like run like 4-5 pick and roll, 3-4 pick and roll. Like the Nets don't have a single guy that can do that. And so at that point, these guards do become important just from a basketball functionality standpoint and a growth standpoint for guys like Clowney, guys like Jalen Wilson, who need guys on their team to unlock the best things that they do. That's just what it is. Like that's how the NBA works. And so I'm pro keeping as many of these guys on the roster as possible because it's just going to be important for the other dudes. And we want to see Cam Thomas grow into a point guard role. And we've seen, little bits and pieces of them maybe trying to experiment with that. But I don't think that's a right out of the box kind of thing either.
No, I'm a big youth guy, but already seeing that it doesn't look like having these veterans is going to prohibit the Nets from making sure certain key players get their run and get their development. Keeping another guy around like Shake Milton is never going to hurt. What are we looking for, though, when it comes to this preseason game against the 76ers? Are there some new wrinkles? Are there some new combinations that we wouldn't mind seeing? Let's go ahead and lay that out for you here coming up next.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Gametime. Look, nothing better than going to the game right now. Whether you're going to the stadium, whether you're going to the rink, nothing better than NHL Live. You can't really beat NHL Live. Just, as a guy who's like not even a huge hockey fan, I do know I'm willing to watch hockey when it's live because it's just such a better product. Gametime is going to hook you up with tickets for this and so much more. Maybe it's the NHL, NBA, NFL, MLB even still happening in the New York area. Tickets starting at $128 for a Mets NLCS game. Stop it. There's some Yankee stuff up there too. Prices a little steeper over on Gametime, but you're still going to find the absolute best deal with Gametime. You're also going to be able to see the seats before you sit down. You get the lowest price guarantee, so it's all there for you. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA. $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Game 3 of the preseason, we've already discussed on yesterday's episode the veterans, the starting unit, the expectations there. We've now moved into that 6 through 8, maybe even 9 player that's going to be coming in for the Brooklyn Nets. But now we have another preseason game, Doug. Is there something here in the absence still of Nicholas Claxton, expecting to be ready for the regular season? That's all good. is there anything different that you would like to see? Because we got a sample size on Simmons and Clowney, and then you can think about Claxton being in that role with Clowney at times. But I do wonder about heading towards the regular season, whether or not we're going to get stuck with the initial Ben Simmons, Nicholas Claxton in the starting five. I really would prefer to avoid that. And I don't know if that means trying to take Ben Simmons out of the starting unit in a preseason game to play him with some of these other guys, Ziaire Williams, Jalen Wilson, and say, hey, maybe there's something here that we can start to see before we get to the regular season and have to make that call.
I mean, I'm a proponent of breaking up the Claxton Simmons pairing. I don't think it does anyone any favors. So I think that they should be kind of like word one. Right. Yeah. And honestly, the way I would do it is pretty simple. It is bring Simmons off the bench in the first rotation and bring him in with Clowney. And so you sub out Claxton with the first rotation. You bring Simmons and Clowney in the first rotation. And now you have not a true center probably, but two guys who can become a tandem center if you need to through a switching scheme, and if you end up the low man, like you're not Dust and whatever. So that's what I think. That's very obvious to me, because Clowney would be helped by having a guy like Simmons, because Clowney can space the floor and Simmons can find open shooters. If Simmons wants to make a commitment to get to the rim, if you have guys like Clowney, DFS, Cam Johnson, and like Cam Thomas or Schroeder, like maybe it's like a Schroeder plus Claxton come off, Simmons plus Clowney come in, and keep everything else. That's a good lineup. I take that all day. Like, that seems so obvious to me, and it basically puts everyone's best foot forward in terms of being able to like really unlock the things that they do well. Because the thing is, when you start Simmons with Claxton, it screws everything else up, right? Yeah. They can't play together. Suffers. It's not a hot take. It's not a hot take. They just can't play together. They they jam up whatever the other guy does well. That's fine. No problem. But just do this other thing. Make that the first rotation, and then do whatever. It almost just makes so much sense to me that I will be very annoyed if it doesn't happen. And if they end up doing this thing where they start them together, because that is like sort of the money concern, which we've talked about many times.
Yeah.
It would still be, I would still find it like pretty damn frustrating.
Yeah, and you mentioned there too, because I think the other benefit, I think I tried to have this conviction when we did those minutes breakdowns initially, where I went super bold and then kind of backed myself off of who should be in the starting rotation. But if you took out Schroeder and you took out Claxton, you said Simmons and you bring in Clowney, right? Like, okay, great. And you like that unit there. The other benefit then too is because the one thing I think you want to do over the course of a game would also be get the sample size of Clowney and Claxton, right? We saw that at the end of last season. We saw that work really well together in those samples. So you can take Claxton off and then again, spread it, leave Clowney out a little bit longer, right? Extend whatever his minutes are going to be, and bring Claxton back in, get that sample size. And then you can take out Cam Johnson, bring in Jalen Wilson. Like, and this is kind of the point of keeping balance. No matter what your expectations are for the season, as you mentioned in the last segment, rolling out 5 balls with a bunch of rookies or young players that don't have a ton of a sense of, exactly where they need to be, or having traditional ball handlers on the floor to help orchestrate, is only going to be the detriment of everyone. These things we're talking about, and I think you would agree, are not about wins or losses. It's just about having balance in these rotations so that everyone benefits from it, so that everyone's development from the young standpoint benefits, so that every veteran benefits because their minutes look the best and their trade prospects look the best for the organization, right? Like, selling yourself short on the team is going to lose a bunch of games. It doesn't matter. So who cares if you play Nick Claxton and Ben Simmons together? No. Because there is a ripple effect of all the damage it can do in the short and long term for the players on this roster.
Yeah. And again, like just like it's a functional basketball thing. Like, what makes the most sense?
By the way, that was the sound of Doug being exhausted by the idea that we still have to clarify that Ben Simmons and Nicholas Claxton shouldn't be playing together.
I still get pushback from this from people. It's insane to me. It's insane. The numbers are so clear. It couldn't be more clear. It doesn't pass the statistical test without KD and Kyrie, and it doesn't pass the eye test either. And that point, those are all the tests. So there's no more tests.
2 tests that you failed.
Oh, well, the other test is like your gut test, and that doesn't count for anything. So after that, there's really no other place to turn. And so, but again, all good. The Nets have guys that do pair well with these guys, right? And so it doesn't need to be this constant sort of friction between what should happen and what shouldn't. The Nets have combinations that can work. They just have to be committed to doing it.
Yeah, yes. And that's the Jordi Fernandez piece of this as we move into the third preseason game against Philadelphia. He doesn't, I thought something interesting the other day because they were talking about Chi and he's knocking down some triples late and they're asking Cam Thomas in the post game. He's like, yeah, man, it was great. It's exciting. He said, it's something the coach has been preaching, getting together. We all feel like we're a tight knit group. We're really excited for one another, want everyone to do well. It was a really positive kind of vibe message from Cam Thomas. And then it cuts to Jordi Fernandez, asked basically the same thing. And he goes, yeah, I guess that's good. I want the guys to have fun. I want it to be fun. Also, I want it to be functional. I want it to be developing. I want it to be working and, doing what they need to do inside of the system. So there's those two dynamics at work here sometimes when you think about how players are going to fit in and what roles they're going to serve. So even though I heard Jordi Fernandez say earlier this offseason, well, we saw samples of Simmons and Claxton and it worked, and maybe we'll tap into that. We're not going to be scared to do it. My early impression of Jordi Fernandez is he doesn't like non-functional stuff. He doesn't like basketball that doesn't look like a strongly formed and executed game plan on both ends of the floor. So even if he dreams a little dream, he can't. There's no way that he could. That those two guys would share it. I just think that he would get an immediate sample size and say, okay, this doesn't work. This isn't working for anybody. We're not going to do it again. I hope that that's the case, unlike previous years where it's always been the optimism of what Ben Simmons could be convinces you to do things that, as you say, the eye test and the statistical test do not suggest you should be going down the road of. So I find that part fascinating as we head into this preseason game number 3. And by the way, not unlike other years, Doug, we won't know because there's always the injuries play that little role where we won't get the final sample size on what to expect in the regular season.
Yeah, I'm pro Jordi Fernandez where it comes to this. I think he was such a great hire. Like just from what we've seen already, the track record that he has, sort of the temperament and the commitment to, I think what he's trying to espouse as a coach. I think he was the perfect hire for this. He just has just the right mix of, high-end coaching experience with the Canadian team and like a ton of fire where it comes to just like wanting to be a really just committed professional to this and just built a life around this. And so most coaches that have gotten to this point have built a life around it. So that's not necessarily a standout, but he just seems like so ready for like this kind of role. And I think that kind of attitude and the things he said, it already just lines up. All right. We are going to get out of here. A couple housekeeping notes here. First, if you want to, we have something free for everyone. Likes something free. Go to wegotnets.com right now. We Got Nets. You're going to get 4 of the key stories you're looking at for this season, right? It's 4 emails, 4 stories, 4 days, totally free. Your email, you get it. That's it. That's the whole transaction. It's free. We put it together. Took a lot of pride in it. It's going to get you started for the season. So go make sure you do that. And also make sure that you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Locked On Nets over on YouTube, Locked On Nets, Spotify, iTunes, wherever.
The moon moves in the same direction as the Earth's rotation. That's the action of rotating around an axis or center. Something to think about when we talk about how this roster shakes out. And that's obviously, Doug, from the Oxford Languages Dictionary.
One of the all-time great poets, I guess. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Yeah.